So in this system here, I have 4 converters set for outputs. These 2 here and these 2 here. Then I have 6 converters set for HDMI inputs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, starting at input 9. Then I have 2 Hyperdecks for record. They are my primary and my backup record. They both record program, but they don't have to. I can send whatever I want to them because they're an aux out. Okay, another rack build. We're gonna take everything in this rack, at least all the important parts. We're gonna put it into this 4U SKB case so it's a little easier to transport. Let's get started. Pretty obvious, this is the ATEM Constellation HD. This is the 2ME version. It is all SDI on the back, okay? I'm actually taking 2 Hyperdecks, but I needed this rack shelf here. Primary and a backup. Swapping this 3rd Hyperdeck here for a web presenter is because this is an encoder. It's got 2 USB-C outs, which means I can do 2 webcam outputs just from this guy. And by the way, this guy, the switcher, has a webcam out in itself. So that's a total of 3 webcam outs I can do with this combination here. Backup that I can plug a phone into and use that as a, kind of a failover, right? Monitor out, which gives me a lot of data that lets me understand what's happening with my live stream. 4K version was really just a future-proof move. Power strip, trip light, self-explanatory. I don't know why this isn't a product yet that really should be. 10 converters, bidirectional converters, right? So they do HDMI to SDI, SDI to HDMI, and it can do a loop through if you choose just one signal path. A 1U rack would be awesome. 10 in, 10 outs, SDI to HDMI bidirectional, that would be perfect. I got the little USB hub that powers all 10 of them, so that's easy. Deck link capture card, but it can be used for both inputs and outputs. And I specifically use this for Pro Presenter, for playback and certain graphic overlays and whatnot. So this will allow me to do 4 separate outputs out of a single Pro Presenter computer. A key and a fill, a playback, and then a confidence monitor view. 4 different views with 1 box. So those are all the pieces of hardware that I'm using. Notice I gave up a bunch of the extra Hyperdecks because I don't really ISO record that often. Really just been using our program records. Patch panels are great and helpful, but I feel like I got around that by the way I'm gonna have this configured. This switcher is not actually going inside the rack, but rather on top of the rack. That means that all of these ports will actually be exposed. Now, patch panels are great because that way I don't accidentally wear out or break off or damage the back of this guy as I plug and unplug all the cables, right? So I am taking that risk, but I'm probably gonna be the only one really using this. I'm gonna be more careful than, let's say, other people. I'm gonna bite the bullet and not use a patch panel, save that extra space in the rack, and just use the ports in the back. The network switch, I'm just doing an 8-port smaller network switch. I didn't need the larger one. May or may not put a wireless router inside, but again, that's all stuff that's gonna fit in the back of the rack because none of this stuff is that deep. So that's all the gear here. Next step is to get out the rack, start putting some of the gear in it, and let's see if it all fits. Now this is the SKB rack that I chose. This is actually an older model SKB, and the reason for that is all of the space it has up top. It has a very deep lid. I did look into the newer version of the rack. Doesn't allow for the switcher to fit up top. I tried, I measured. That is the reason I'm not going with the newer SKB Studio Flyer. Let's get into it. So, let's see here. Yep, this is gonna be hard to do. All right. This is what the front of this rack could look like. We're just gonna rip up the foam. That's going to live right there. That is the idea. Again, look how much space I have behind this guy to mount and plug in all of these SDI cables. And I still get to keep this extra foam on top. Not bad. Mounting this switcher to here. So I'm gonna take that off as well. Let's get it mounted. Throwing knives for the win. Okay, so I'll do a Velcro strip on the side there, a Velcro strip here, and a Velcro strip in the middle. And I'm doing 3 strips instead of 2, just so it's fully supported. All right, so now that we have this sticky side up, ready to go, all I'm gonna do is eyeball this, center it up here. All right, so that's not really gonna go anywhere. Okay, take this guy, that's a Hyperdeck, take that out. this guy, the web presenter. Let's put that in. There we go, so that is the rack. We have the switcher on top with the back of it very accessible for all the ports. We then have all of my converters and my deck link card, 2 Hyperdecks, a web presenter, and a power strip with outlets on the front and the back. That's what we got. Next step for this guy, it's not insanely heavy, not nearly as heavy as some of my other builds, right? I might drill right through here. I realized my mic might have died while I was wiring the back of this. Let me just go over it real quick for everyone. So we have power coming out the side right here, which is great. That's linked to the power strip. In the back here, I have all of the SDI connections going to things in the rack already wired. Then all of the extra SDI connections are available for me to plug in other things like 8 other cameras or sources, things like that, podium laptop, whatnot, actually 5, but really just 4 other outputs. The reason I say 5 is because I do have 1 extra port down here I'm using as a spacer, like a backup. In case something needs to die, I need to add an encoder or something like that. I have an extra port. So 4 other ports for projectors, confidence monitors, director feed, and whatnot. For HDMI outputs that are really routed all the way down here, so it's SDI out to 4 converters, converting it to HDMI. I could just run a cable inside, and again, I might put a patch panel on the back, but probably not for a while. I have the outputs of all these converters because they can do a loop through. So I have all those that I could be using as extra SDI outputs. I have 2 USB-C cables. These really go all the way down to some wall warts I have in the back here, and these are for my monitors. I do have these very ultra-thin portable monitors here, and they take a USB-C in order to power them. I have those guys there, and those are going to be for my multi-views sitting on top of this guy on a stand. I got my network switch. This is a POE switch. Great thing about POE is that I have some POE cameras. POE stands for Power over Ethernet, which means I can power those cameras through here and get data from them, right? That's not necessarily video signal unless you're using NDI and things like that, but I'll be able to power them and control them from here. And then I have my other 4 for maybe this is the actual internet. This is control going to some of my laptops and things like that. If I plug one of these PoE ports into my web presenter, that is a backup power source. In case my web presenter gets unplugged somehow in the back mid-show, this will act as a backup. So that's a nice touch. Anchor 10-port USB brick that's powering all of these converters in here and making it way more efficient. We'll run 2 1/4-inch cables and have XLRs just sitting back here. Switcher, Hyperdecks, web presenter, all my converters get a light, which means I'm getting power, and basically the light will change color based on if it's an input or an output. So if I'm plugging something in, that light will change to yellow or green, depending on if it's the input going into it. This is in fact input 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, so all those are labeled correctly. So this is output 9, this is output 10. These are actually my outputs 11 and 12, so I do have to relabel them. Any of these outputs can be used as a multi-view or anything like that. It's a great looking stand right there. Not worried about falling off. And the goal is that I can leave those plugged in at all times, put the lid on, and it shouldn't touch anything. And that way the cables will just live on top. Okay, so I have a computer that has both ATEM software and ProPresenter on it. I now have a network switch that has the web presenter, the switcher, and the laptop all plugged in. So this should be networked together. Let's go ahead and pull up our ATEM software and find out. All right, so we're fully set up and wired now. Got my multi-view set, all my labels done. Have a little bit of labeling to do on this guy, but let's go ahead and tear it all down and get some cameras and see how fast we can set the whole thing up and if it's all working and wired correctly. All right, table, nothing on it. Let's go ahead and set up the rack. We do have a couple cameras already set up just to speed things along. So let's see how long it takes up to set up everything. I'll talk through what I'm doing. Once we get the rack open, we don't need this anymore. And we're gonna get our lids off. Usually these go under the table. So, the way I'm gonna use the rack, I'm gonna put it off on the side, and then all this space will be for laptops, controllers, things like that. All these cables up here are for everything on the table itself. And so let's hop to the back real quick and just get it powered up. So I do keep the 15-foot power cable in the back, just coiled up. I'm gonna find some power down here, plug it in. So now this guy should be booting up. Network switch right down here, don't have to move it. That's pretty much it in terms of everything inside. I did add these 3 cables here. What these are outputs from the Hyperdecks. The reason I have these is because I have some cameras that take an SDI input in order to do camera control, and I didn't want to waste some of my outputs just doing camera control. I want those going to actual destinations. So I'm hoping that the control can go through the Hyperdecks, because it's through 16 channels of audio, through the Hyperdecks, and then I can output right to the cameras. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, I'll work around it. So now that I have the switcher up, let's go ahead and get some laptops. So I got one laptop. It's going to be my Pro Presenter and my control. So I'll put that guy right here. I have this laptop. It can simulate, let's say, a Zoom drone, Zoom webinar, some sort of webcam input-output. And then I got some monitors. Again, these guys are great. I'm just going to flip these up. And this is all of my cables. So I got USB-Cs. I got 2 of them specifically for the control laptop here. One USB-C is power. Then I have HDMI. And that multi-view is done. Let's grab my other one here. And I have power. Now, the reason this is so fast is because we already have all the converters inside the rack. HDMI, SDI conversion already happening. So that makes life pretty easy. So let's boot up this laptop here. 2 cables, one for Pro Presenter and one for the Ethernet, data, charging, etc. And then finally, we'll do this guy here. Now, this guy, I did not pre-wire any USB-Cs for, so we need 2 things. We need power, we need a charger, and we need to get an HDMI from here into here. And again, we're not worried about audio right now. Normally, in a larger conference, we'd have someone else, a whole other table dedicated to audio and the microphones. I'm gonna plug this into input 9. So now I'm getting signal from this laptop into here, and let's run a USB cable from here. We'll run it from the web presenter, or I could run it from the back of the switcher back to here. That's our feed going back to Zoom. Webcam out, going back to Zoom. So last thing I would need to do with this is a mix minus for audio. Again, we're not worried about audio right now. So now I have my ATEM software up, I have Pro Presenter hooked up, so I technically have 5 sources already hooked up. Now let's do all the cameras. So I have a total of 5 cameras here ready to go. Some of them are HDMI, some of them are SDI, some of them take 2 SDIs just to control it. So I did run a bunch of the cables already. Anything that is a red SDI cable is going to be a feed going back to the camera. So let's go ahead and plug those in here. I'm not worried about which one's which because they should all be getting camera control. Okay, so those are my feeds going back to the cameras. And now I have my cameras here. For this purpose, I'm not concerned which one's which, but we're just gonna plug them into the first couple inputs here. So we got camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. So now our SDI is wired. I said we had 2 HDMI cameras. Now the thing about these cameras here is I have the HDMIs right here. We're actually gonna plug this into the front of the rack because that's where all of our converters are. So because we just used input 9 for this laptop, we're gonna use input 10 and input 11. Great, so now we have that wired there. Last thing is these cameras also have POE in order to power them. So we need to get Ethernet. That's gonna handle control, that's gonna be the zoom for the camera, as well as the color settings of the camera, iris, focus, things like that, and power, all coming from one Ethernet cable. Again, the box can handle it. So we're gonna plug these guys in here, and now we should be able to control the cameras as well as power them all from the network switch. And finally, let's get our destination. So let's pretend I have two TVs over here. One of them is the projector, the other one is the confidence monitor. They could be two different projectors. It doesn't really matter which one's which. We can always change it in software. Awesome. So I'm gonna just plug one of them. I'll plug one into one here, two into output two, and then we can control what we're sending to it through the switcher. All right, so technically we're fully up, right? At this point, I have my cameras wired, I have my outputs plugged in, switchers on, Hyperdecks ready to go, web presenter ready to go. Now it's just a question of like settings in the ATEM software, setting our live stream key for Vimeo into our web presenter, setting camera and correcting colors and matching cameras and things like that. So I have Multiview 2 on this guy and Multiview 1 up here. If I wanted to swap them, I could very easily. I just go to my outputs and I go to my Multiview 1, which is right here, and I can set that to be my other display, and I can go to Multiview 2, and boom, I just swapped them. So I don't really care which output's which. Of course, they are labeled, but meaning I can just do whatever I need to do on the table, and I can add more as well. I have two more HDMI outs right here that I can use. So there's my multi-view, there's my cameras. Let's say instead of having these here, I want media players, or maybe I want Pro Presenter to be. I want playback here, and I want my overlays there. Let's see, I got outputs going there. My screens are black, which is good. So if I start playing a video, it pops up there. Let's go ahead and find an overlay. So this looks like an overlay here. So I have content going here, content going there, two different videos outputting from the same laptop because of Pro Presenter. And I also have information up here in my confidence monitor for Pro Presenter. Again, all four of these outputs, playback, key, fill, and confidence monitor, all coming from this one laptop to this deck link, 4 SDIs going into the switcher. That's how I'm getting everything here. I have a nice clock. Clocks are super important when it comes to live streaming, making sure you're on time. I have a playback timer, knowing how much time I have left in a video, and then I can actually see my overlays as well. So let's go ahead and look at the Blackmagic 1080p. That's what we're getting over here. You can see if I go to the switcher, I'll hit done here. If I go to the switcher and I change what's on program, it's also changing to my USB program feed going in here. So our zoom works, our playback and our control works. If we had companion, this would be running companion as well. Our dual multi-views also work. And what's really nice about having multiple multi-view outputs is that we've done things where we have a remote presenter for a conference, and all they really get to see is what's on program, which would be their own face, right? And maybe their presentation. Sometimes we like to send them out a multi-view, which is 4 different cameras, maybe the program feed, and then a camera shot of the audience, and then maybe a camera facing the stage, and then a wide shot of the stage as well, or an audience shot from the back of the room. So what we can do is we can put all 4 of those views in a single multi-view, Multi-View 2 for instance, route that to our web presenter, and then have the web presenter be feeding this Zoom drone here instead of the program output of the switcher. So that's this rack here. It all fits in what is a 4U rack, but really I got that extra U, that 5th U, by putting it on top. And it all lids up, closes, and is super portable. In the back, I have plenty of outputs. I have access to everything on top. The cables are always there, ready to go. And I'm able to kind of scale and get bigger. I can plug in 2 more HDMI outs. So if I have 2 more multi-views that I want to view here, or I have a confidence monitor for the director, or I just want a bigger screen to put it over by the audio guy so he can see what's going on, I can do all that without running SDI. I can just go HDMI directly out into a monitor. I also have extra SDI outs for confidence monitor feeds, for wireless outputs. I can do wireless inputs with the Axoon wireless systems that we have. So it's just very capable. And of course, I still access all the SDI on the back of these converters if I need to use them as loop-throughs, etc. So that's the whole system here. It's pretty fast to get up and running, especially once the camera's already up. Of course, I take a lot more time to fine-tune everything, program all my looks, my media players, things like that. But just to show you guys what this thing can do and how fast we can output. And by the way, we did plug in the TVs up there, so let me send something up to them. So they were already automatically getting output. So if I just turn the TV on, you're gonna see that we're also sending signal up here. And what I like to do is I usually run my projectors off of, let's say, ME2, unless of course I'm using ME2 as like a second type of one box or something like that. It just means that I can fade in and out and I can do transitions for not only the projector, but also the live stream. So we have two feeds here. They're both currently getting the same signal, but it'd be really easy for me to send two different signals to them just by going to outputs. I go to output 2, and let's run something else. Let's send camera 2 to that output. So now we have something playing a video. We have a live feed of camera 2 over there. And so, again, just lots and lots of flexibility. I'm really happy with this system. Huge shout out to Sam, one of our video techs. He built a very similar version to this that I then said, wow, that's awesome. I need to build one for myself, but of course, I have to make it a little more overkill. So that's where this came from. After building all this, Blackmagic may in fact come out with basically a version of the switcher that has some HDMIs and some SDIs, and then this can get even smaller. But for now, this is what I'm gonna run with. I have a couple conferences coming up that I'm specifically using this for because I needed a smaller form factor than a large rack on wheels. So I have a very small rack on little wheels that I can bring in, carry up some stairs, and run a very large show with. So that's the rack, that's the look. Again, everything's gonna fit in probably 3-4 cases total, including tripods. So very happy with that for the upcoming gigs I have here. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. We do consultations, we do gigs, events, things like that. And it's never the same thing. We're trying to do lots of different things, which we love doing. So let's keep it moving. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.